She heard her fated mate reject her in front of the entire pack. Weak, worthless, unfit, the words sent her running blindly into forbidden territory, bleeding and broken. What she didn't know was that the dangerous stranger who found her trespassing was the Alpha King himself, and he'd been waiting his whole life for her. The silver moonlight painted the clearing in ethereal whites and grays as hundreds of wolves gathered in perfect circles around the ancient stone altar. Tonight was the moon ceremony, the night when the goddess Luna would reveal the fated mates destined to strengthen the Crescent Falls pack. Arya Blackwood stood at the edge of the inner circle, her heart hammering against her ribs as the ceremonial drums echoed through the forest. At 22, she was one of the last unmated females in the pack, and the whispers had already started. Why hasn't Luna chosen her yet? Maybe she's defective. Maybe she's too weak for a proper mate. She pushed the cruel thoughts away, focusing instead on the intoxicating scent that had been driving her wolf crazy all evening. Pine and leather mixed with something darker, more primal. Her mate was here. After years of waiting, she could finally feel the pull. Alpha Marcus Steele stepped forward, his massive frame commanding attention as he raised the ceremonial chalice filled with moonwater. Tonight we honor the bonds that will shape our pack's future. His deep voice boomed across the clearing. Let the goddess reveal what is meant to be. One by one, couples stepped forward as the mate bonds snapped into place, their eyes glowing with the golden light of recognition. Arya watched, her pulse quickening as that intoxicating scent grew stronger. Then she saw him. Garrett Collins, the pack's strongest warrior and Alpha Marcus's chosen heir, emerged from the crowd. His sandy brown hair caught the moonlight, and his steel-gray eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath. The mate bond hit her like lightning, electric, undeniable, perfect. "Garrett," she whispered, taking a step toward him. But instead of the joy she expected to see in his face, she found only cold disgust. No, the single word cut through the night air like a blade. "I, Garrett Collins, future alpha of the Crescent Falls pack, reject you, Arya Blackwood, as my mate." The words hit her like a physical blow. Around them, the pack fell silent, hundreds of eyes turning to witness her humiliation. The mate bond, so new and fragile, began to tear apart inside her chest like barbed wire. "You're weak," Garrett continued, his voice carrying across the clearing for everyone to hear. "You can barely shift properly, you have no rank, no power, no value to this pack. I won't taint my bloodline with your pathetic genes." Arya's knees buckled. The bond's destruction sent waves of agony through her body, but worse than the physical pain was the shame burning through her veins. She could feel every pack member's judgment, their agreement with Garrett's assessment. Alpha Marcus stepped forward, his expression hard as granite. "The rejection has been witnessed," he declared. "Arya Blackwood, you are cast out from the Crescent Falls pack. You have until dawn to cross our borders, or you will be hunted as a rogue." "Alpha, please," Arya gasped, struggling to stay upright. "This is my home. My family." "You have no family here," Marcus cut her off. "You are Omega-born trash who never should have contaminated our sacred ceremony. Leave now or face the consequences." The pack members began to shift, their eyes glowing amber and red in the moonlight. Her own family, her parents, her brother, turned their backs on her without a word. The message was clear. She was alone. Arya ran. She crashed through the underbrush, tears streaming down her face as branches tore at her clothes and skin. Behind her, she could hear them shifting, their howls echoing through the forest as they gave her a head start before beginning the hunt. She had maybe 10 minutes. Her wolf was too broken from the rejected bond to shift properly, leaving her stumbling through the darkness on human legs, while supernatural predators closed in behind her. Every shadow seemed to hide glowing eyes. Every rustling branch announced their approach. A snarl erupted from her left. Arya dove behind a fallen log, just as a massive gray wolf leaped through the space where she'd been standing. She recognized him, Jake Morrison, a pack warrior who'd always treated her with barely concealed contempt. They're not just hunting me, she realized with growing horror. They're enjoying it. More wolves emerged from the trees, circling her hiding spot with predatory grace. She could smell their excitement, their bloodlust. This wasn't an exile. It was an execution disguised as tradition. Desperation gave her strength. She bolted from behind the log, adrenaline pushing her faster than she'd ever moved before. A wolf snapped at her heels, its teeth catching the edge of her dress and tearing the fabric away. The border. She had to reach the border. She could see it ahead. A line of silver markers glinting in the moonlight, separating Crescent Falls territory from the forbidden lands beyond. The Shadowmere territory, domain of the Alpha King himself. No wolf crossed that border without permission. The punishment was death. But death waited behind her too, and at least crossing the border would be quick. She sprinted across the silver line just as claws raked down her back, sending her tumbling down a steep embankment. Pain exploded through her body as she hit rocks and roots, finally coming to rest in a broken heap at the bottom of a ravine. Above her, the Crescent Falls wolves paced along the border, whining and snarling but refusing to cross. They'd rather lose their prey than face the Alpha King's wrath. Arya tried to push herself up but collapsed as agony shot through her ribs. Blood soaked through her torn dress, and she could taste copper in her mouth. Her vision blurred as darkness crept in around the edges. This is how I die, she thought numbly. Alone, rejected, bleeding out in forbidden territory. Footsteps crunched on gravel nearby. She forced her eyes open and found herself staring at a pair of black leather boots. Her gaze traveled upward, taking in long legs encased in dark jeans, a broad chest covered by a simple black t-shirt, and finally a face that made her breath catch in her throat. He was devastatingly handsome, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw covered with dark stubble, and the most piercing blue eyes she'd ever seen. His black hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and power radiated from him like heat waves. This had to be him. The Alpha King. Lucien Shadowmere. Well, he said, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers through her despite her pain. What do we have here? Arya tried to speak but could only manage a weak whimper. He crouched down beside her, and she caught his scent. Dark chocolate and thunderstorms, wild and dangerous and completely intoxicating. Please, she whispered. Just make it quick. Something flickered in those blue eyes, surprise, maybe even concern. He reached out carefully, his fingers barely brushing her cheek, and she felt a jolt of electricity at the contact. Interesting, he murmured almost to himself. Then his voice grew stronger, more certain. I, Lucien Shadowmere, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, claim you as my mate. The words hit her like a second lightning strike. Around them, the very air seemed to shimmer with power as an entirely new bond began to form. Not the fragile thread she'd shared with Garrett, but something infinitely stronger, deeper, more permanent. Arya stared up at him in shock, certain she was hallucinating from blood loss. But the bond pulsing between them felt completely impossibly real. Arya's eyes fluttered open to the sight of a stone ceiling painted with intricate murals of wolves running beneath star-filled skies. For a moment, she wondered if she died and somehow ended up in wolf heaven. Then the memories crashed back, the rejection, the hunt, the impossible claim from the Alpha King. She bolted upright, immediately regretting it as pain shot through her bandaged ribs. She was lying in the most luxurious bed she'd ever seen, wrapped in silk sheets that probably cost more than her family's entire house. The room around her was like something from a medieval castle, complete with tapestries, a crackling fireplace, and windows that looked out over a sprawling fortress. You're awake, the deep voice made her jump. Lucien sat in a leather chair beside the bed, still wearing those dark jeans and black t-shirt, though now she could see the subtle designer labels. Even sitting casually, power radiated from every line of his body. This is real, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Very real. His blue eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. She touched her bandaged ribs carefully. How long was I out? 2 days. My pack healers worked around the clock to fix what your former family did to you. The way he said former family carried enough venom to kill a small army. Before she could respond, the massive oak door burst open. A woman with platinum blonde hair and the kind of perfect features that belonged on magazine covers strode in, her high heels clicking against the stone floor. Her designer dress hugged curves that would make supermodels weep with envy, and her green eyes blazed with barely contained fury. Lucian, what the hell is this? She demanded, gesturing toward Arya like she was a piece of trash. The entire fortress is talking about how you claimed some rejected Omega. Lucian's expression turned arctic. Watch your tone, Victoria. And her name is Arya. Victoria's laugh was sharp and cruel. Oh, I know exactly who she is. Word travels fast in our world. Arya Blackwood, rejected by her own fated mate for being too weak and pathetic to carry warrior blood. She looked Arya up and down with disgust. I can see why. That's enough. Lucian's voice carried the unmistakable command of an alpha king, and Victoria actually took a step back. But the damage was done. Arya could feel her face burning with shame as the truth hit her. Everyone knew. Every supernatural creature in the Northern Territories had heard about her humiliation. You need to see the council, Victoria said, her voice slightly more respectful but still dripping with disdain. They're concerned about your recent decision. Lucian stood, and Arya was struck again by just how imposing he was. At least 6'4" with broad shoulders and the kind of lean muscle that spoke of deadly speed. He dominated the room simply by existing. Rest, he told Arya, his voice gentling. I'll be back soon. After they left, Arya forced herself out of bed despite her protesting body. She needed to understand where she was and what she'd gotten herself into. The fortress was massive, with corridors that seemed to stretch for miles and ceilings so high her voice would probably echo. Tapestries depicting great battles and legendary wolves hung from every wall, and she could smell the scent of hundreds of different pack members throughout the building. But as she explored, she began to notice something disturbing. Every person she passed, from the elegant she-wolves in expensive clothes to the warriors with their muscled frames and tactical gear, bowed respectfully when they thought she wasn't looking, but their eyes told a different story. Fear, disgust, suspicion. Did you hear she was rejected by her own mate? Whispered a brunette in designer jeans to her companion as Arya passed. My cousin in Crescent Falls says she couldn't even shift properly during training, came the hushed reply. What kind of curse must she carry? She'll bring ruin to us all. Mark my words. No good comes from keeping the goddess's rejects. Arya hurried past them, but the whispers followed her everywhere. In the kitchens, the staff fell silent when she entered, their conversations resuming in nervous murmurs after she left. In the training yards, warriors paused their sparring to stare at her with expressions ranging from pity to outright hostility. She was an outsider in every sense of the word, not just new but fundamentally unwanted. Following the sound of raised voices, she found herself outside a set of imposing double doors. Through the crack, she could see Lucian standing at the head of a long table surrounded by important-looking wolves in expensive suits. This is madness, Your Majesty, an older man with silver hair was saying. The girl was rejected by her own fated mate. In our world, that's a sign of deep corruption in her bloodline. She's weak, added a woman with sharp features and calculating eyes. What message does this send to our enemies? That the Alpha King settles for damaged goods. The other packs are already talking. Another council member chimed in. They're saying you've lost your judgment, that desperation has made you claim the first stray that wandered across your border. Lucian's hands were clenched into fists on the table. I don't recall asking for your opinions on my mate. She's not your mate. Victoria's voice cut through the tension. She's a broken Omega who will bring nothing but shame to this throne. Send her away before she destroys everything you've built. The prophecies speak of a Luna who will unite the packs, the silver-haired man said quietly. This girl couldn't even keep her birth pack from rejecting her. She's the opposite of what we need. Arya backed away from the door, her heart shattering all over again. Even here, in the place where she'd been given an impossible second chance, she was seen as a curse, a burden, a mistake. Maybe they were right. Maybe she really was too broken to be anyone's mate, let alone the Alpha King's. But as she turned to flee, she heard Lucian's voice, low and deadly. Anyone who questions my choice questions me. And I promise you that's not a mistake you'll make twice. The bond between them pulsed with his conviction, and for the first time since waking up, Arya felt a tiny spark of hope flicker to life in her chest. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. The nightmare was always the same. Arya stood in the center of the moon ceremony clearing while hundreds of golden eyes judged her, found her lacking, and turned away in disgust. Garrett's voice echoed through the darkness. Weak, pathetic, worthless. Then came the hunt, the claws, the taste of her own blood as she ran for her life. She jerked awake, her heart racing and cold sweat coating her skin. The silk sheets were twisted around her legs like restraints, and for a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Shadowmere Fortress. Lucian's territory. Safe. The word felt foreign in her mind. She'd never truly been safe anywhere. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Come in, she called, quickly wiping the tears from her cheeks. Lucian entered carrying a breakfast tray, and she was struck again by how surreal this all felt. The most powerful alpha in North America, serving her eggs and toast like she was someone worth caring for. Bad dreams? He asked, setting the tray on her nightstand. His blue eyes missed nothing, taking in her pale complexion and the way she unconsciously pulled the blankets higher. Just adjusting, she lied, forcing a smile that felt as fragile as spun glass. He sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that she could smell his intoxicating scent of thunderstorms and dark chocolate. Tell me about your wolf. The innocent question hit her like a physical blow. Her wolf, the part of her that had always been weaker than everyone else's, that couldn't shift properly, that had made her an easy target for years of mockery. She's damaged, Arya whispered, staring at her hands. Even before Garrett rejected us, she was never strong enough. During my first shift, I got stuck halfway for 3 hours while the other kids laughed. The memory burned like acid in her throat. The pack elders said I was probably born wrong, that maybe my bloodline was corrupted somehow. Look at me. Lucian's voice was gentle but commanding. When she reluctantly met his gaze, she saw something that made her breath catch. Not pity, not disappointment, but genuine anger on her behalf. They were fools, he said fiercely. Every single one of them. Your wolf isn't damaged. She's been suppressed by years of being told she wasn't good enough. But what if they were right? The words tumbled out before she could stop them. What if I really am defective? What if claiming me was a mistake that ruins everything you've built? For a moment, something dangerous flashed in Lucian's eyes. Is that what you think? That I'm some impulsive fool who makes life-altering decisions on a whim? No, I've ruled these territories for 8 years, he continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I've united packs that had been at war for centuries. I've expanded our borders and strengthened our defenses against human encroachment. I didn't accomplish any of that by making mistakes. The conviction in his voice made something flutter in her chest, but the voices of doubt were louder. Weak, pathetic, cursed. Later that afternoon, Arya found herself in the fortress gardens, desperately needing fresh air and space to think. The grounds were beautiful. Perfectly manicured lawns surrounded by flower beds that would bloom magnificently come spring. But even here, she couldn't escape the whispers. 2 young she-wolves were sitting on a bench nearby, their voices carrying on the wind. I heard Alpha Marcus is already looking for a new alliance match for Garrett, one was saying. Smart of him to dodge that bullet. Can you imagine if she'd actually become Luna of Crescent Falls? The other replied with a laugh. The pack would have been the laughingstock of the supernatural world. Arya's hands clenched into fists. The familiar rage that she'd been pushing down for days suddenly flared to life, hot and consuming. She imagined walking back into that clearing, her wolf finally strong and powerful, watching the fear replace the mockery in their eyes. She wanted to see Garrett grovel, wanted to watch Alpha Marcus realize what a massive mistake he'd made, wanted them to suffer the way they'd made her suffer. The violent thoughts scared her with their intensity. This wasn't who she was supposed to be. Luna Queens were supposed to be noble and forgiving, not consumed with fantasies of revenge. Arya. She spun around to find Lucian approaching, his expression concerned. Had he heard her thoughts somehow? Could he sense the darkness growing inside her? I was just getting some air, she said quickly, schooling her features into what she hoped looked like calm. But his sharp eyes saw too much. What were you thinking about just now? Tell him about the nightmares. Tell him about the rage. Tell him you're probably exactly as broken as everyone says. Nothing important, she lied. He studied her for a long moment, and she held her breath, certain he would see through her deception and realize claiming her had been a mistake. Instead, he surprised her by taking her hand. Walk with me, he said. They strolled through the gardens in comfortable silence until they reached a small gazebo overlooking the fortress walls. The view was breathtaking. Rolling hills covered in dark forest stretched to the horizon, painted gold by the late afternoon sun. When I was 10, Lucian said quietly, my father was challenged by a rival alpha who thought he could take our territory. The bastard poisoned half our pack's water supply before the official fight. Arya looked up at him in shock. She'd never heard this story. My father won the challenge, but barely. He was weakened by the poison and everyone knew it. For months afterward, other alphas circled like vultures, waiting for their chance to finish what the first one started. His jaw clenched. I used to lie awake at night planning how I would kill them all. Lucian. The point is, he continued, turning to face her, wanting revenge doesn't make you weak or broken. It makes you survivable. Your old pack tried to destroy you, and part of you wants to return the favor. That's not corruption. That's proof you still have fight left in you. The understanding in his voice nearly broke her. This powerful, dangerous man saw the darkness she was trying so hard to hide, and instead of being disgusted, he recognized it as strength. I'm not who you think I am, she whispered. No, he agreed, stepping closer until she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You're better. You just don't know it yet. When he cupped her face gently in his hands, she felt tears she didn't realize she'd been holding back start to fall. Give yourself time, he murmured. And stop trying so hard to be perfect. I didn't claim a perfect Luna. I claimed you. The emergency council meeting was called at dawn, 3 days after a message arrived that made even Lucian's most trusted advisors pale. Arya wasn't supposed to be there, but she'd learned that information was power in this world of political maneuvering, so she positioned herself in the hidden alcove behind the tapestry where she could hear everything. The Western Territories Alliance has officially requested a formal audience, announced Elder Samuel, his silver hair gleaming under the chandelier light. His weathered hands shook slightly as he held the ornate parchment. They're citing concerns about the stability of the Northern Crown. Lucian stood at the head of the massive oak table, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack stone. Translation. They want to challenge your fitness to rule, Victoria said, her green eyes glittering with something that looked almost like satisfaction. Alpha Raymond Blackthorn is leading the charge, with support from the Montana Pack Coalition and the Great Lakes Alliance. Arya's blood ran cold. Raymond Blackthorn was legendary, an alpha who'd conquered 6 territories and ruled them with an iron fist. If he was mobilizing against Lucian, this was more than political posturing. What's their official complaint? Lucian asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Elder Marcus, a thin man with calculating eyes, cleared his throat. They claim that by mating with the rejected Omega, you've shown compromised judgment that puts all northern packs at risk. They're calling it, he paused, choosing his words carefully, a sign of the Luna curse. The what? Lucian's voice was deadly quiet. An old superstition, Samuel explained reluctantly. The belief that a wolf rejected by her fated mate carries corruption that spreads to anyone who claims her. They're saying your choice proves the curse has already begun affecting your decision-making. Arya pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle a gasp. Everything was her fault. Lucian's enemies were using her rejection as a weapon against him. There's more, Victoria added. And now Arya was certain she heard satisfaction in the woman's voice. Alpha Blackthorn has reached out to several unmated alphas, offering them alliance marriages with his daughters and nieces. He's building a coalition based on the promise that once you're removed, they'll have access to proper Luna bloodlines. He's essentially putting a bounty on the Northern Crown, Elder Marcus said grimly, and using your mate as justification. Through the crack in the tapestry, Arya could see Lucian's hands clenched into fists on the table. The scent of his anger, ozone and copper filled the room. Your Majesty, Samuel said carefully, perhaps it's time to consider alternative arrangements. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Explain. The girl could be kept as a companion, Samuel suggested, his voice growing smaller under Lucian's stare. While you take a proper Luna for political purposes, many alphas have secondary arrangements. The oak table split down the middle with a sound like thunder as Lucian's controls snapped. Anyone who suggests I abandon my mate will find themselves banished from this territory before sunset. But Arya barely heard the threat. Secondary arrangement. Mistress. Hidden away while Lucian married someone worthy of being Luna Queen. She'd heard enough. That evening she found herself in the fortress's library, trying to lose herself in ancient texts about pack histories and Luna bloodlines. Anything to stop thinking about the political storm brewing around her. Well, the little curse hiding among the books. Arya looked up to find 3 she-wolves standing in the doorway. She recognized them as members of Lucian's court, elegant, powerful females from prominent pack families. The leader was a stunning redhead named Scarlet, whose father controlled the eastern border territories. I'm sorry, did you need something? Arya asked, closing her book and standing slowly. We need you gone, Scarlet said bluntly, striding into the library with her companions flanking her like a hunting pack. Do you have any idea what you're doing to him? To all of us. I'm not doing anything. You're destroying everything. The brunette on Scarlet's left, Diana, Arya remembered, stepped forward aggressively. Lucian had offers from 12 alpha families for alliance marriages. 12. Now they're all pulling back because he's compromised himself with damaged goods. I didn't ask for this, Arya said, backing toward the window as they advanced. But you're not leaving either, are you? Scarlet's smile was sharp as broken glass. You're going to cling to him until his enemies tear down everything he's built. He chose me, Arya said, hating how weak her voice sounded. He made a mistake. The third she-wolf, a blonde named Crystal, hissed. And mistakes need to be corrected. Scarlet pulled a small vial from her purse, the liquid inside glowing with an eerie silver light. Wolfsbane extract. Completely undetectable once it's in your system. You'll just fade away. Lucian will grieve for a respectable amount of time, then choose a proper mate. Arya's wolf stirred for the first time in days, recognizing the mortal threat. You're talking about murder. We're talking about saving our people, Diana snapped. Your pathetic existence isn't worth the stability of the entire northern territories. One little accident, Crystal added. A fall down the stairs, maybe some wolfsbane to make sure you don't heal. Everyone will assume you were too weak to survive the stress of court life. They were closing in, and Arya realized with growing horror that they weren't just making threats. They had actually planned her death down to the last detail. But before they could reach her, the library door slammed open. Ladies, Lucian's voice cut through the tension like a blade. His blue eyes swept the scene, taking in Arya's terrified expression and the vial in Scarlett's hand. I trust you're not threatening what belongs to me. Scarlett quickly hid the wolfsbane behind her back. Your Majesty, we were just discussing pack politics with your companion. Is that what you call conspiracy to commit murder? Lucian asked conversationally, but Arya could feel the deadly power radiating from him. Because that's what I heard from the hallway. The 3 she-wolves went pale as death. You have 10 seconds to leave my territory, Lucian continued in that same terrifyingly calm voice. If I see any of you again, I'll demonstrate exactly why challenging the Alpha King is considered suicide. They fled like the cowards they were, leaving Arya alone with Lucian and the crushing weight of realization. This is never going to stop, she whispered. As long as I'm here, you'll have enemies circling like vultures. Lucian crossed to her in 3 quick strides, pulling her against his chest. Let them circle, he said fiercely. I've been dealing with ambitious wolves my entire life. They'll learn that threatening you is the fastest way to earn a death sentence. But as she buried her face against his shoulder, Arya couldn't shake the feeling that the real war was just beginning. The training grounds at dawn were brutal and unforgiving. Exactly what Arya needed to quiet the chaos in her mind. For 2 weeks, she'd thrown herself into combat training with Lucian's elite warriors, pushing her body past its limits in a desperate attempt to prove she belonged here. Again, barked Commander Kane, a scarred veteran with steel-gray hair and no patience for weakness. You're telegraphing your moves like a rookie. Arya wiped sweat from her forehead and reset her stance. Across from her, Marcus, one of Lucian's top fighters, waited with the patient stillness of a predator. At 6'2" with muscles like carved granite, he could snap her in half without breaking a sweat. But something had changed in her over the past weeks. The constant threat, the political pressure, the knowledge that enemies surrounded her. It had awakened something fierce and primal in her wolf. Marcus lunged. This time, instead of backing away, Arya sidestepped and drove her elbow into his ribs with enough force to make him grunt in surprise. Before he could recover, she swept his legs and sent him crashing to the ground. Better, Kane acknowledged grudgingly. Your wolf is finally waking up. Arya felt a surge of pride at the praise, but it was immediately followed by a darker thought. If I'd been this strong before, Garrett never would have rejected me. The idea had been growing like poison in her mind for days. What if she could return to Crescent Falls not as the broken Omega they'd cast out, but as someone powerful enough to destroy them all? Arya, Lucian's voice cut through her violent fantasies. She turned to find him watching from the edge of the training ground, his blue eyes unreadable. Walk with me. They left the fortress grounds and headed into the forest, walking in silence until they reached a clearing where ancient pine trees formed a natural cathedral. Here, away from the political machinations and watchful eyes, Arya felt like she could finally breathe. You're getting stronger, Lucian said, settling against a fallen log. Kane says you took down Marcus 3 times yesterday. He was going easy on me, Arya replied automatically, though part of her thrilled at the accomplishment. Marcus doesn't go easy on anyone. Trust me, I've got the scars to prove it. Lucian's expression grew serious. But that's not why I brought you here. You've been distant lately. Arya's heart clenched. She'd been pulling away from him, she knew that. Every night when he held her, every gentle touch, every moment of tenderness, it all felt like a betrayal of the rage burning inside her. I am fine, she lied. You're planning something, it wasn't a question. I can see it in your eyes, feel it through our bond. You're thinking about Crescent Falls. The words hit too close to home. They deserve to pay for what they did. Yes, they do, Lucian agreed, surprising her. But revenge is a poison, Arya. It'll consume you from the inside out if you let it. Easy for you to say, she snapped, her carefully controlled mask finally cracking. You've never been rejected, humiliated, hunted like an animal by people who were supposed to protect you. You don't know what it feels like to be thrown away like garbage. Lucian's jaw tightened. You think I don't understand loss? Pain. I watched my mother die when I was 12, killed by a rival alpha who wanted to weaken my father. I spent years fantasizing about tearing him apart with my bare hands. And did you? No. Because I learned that the best revenge is building something they can never touch or destroy. He reached out, cupping her face gently. You want to show Crescent Falls what they lost? Become the Luna Queen you were meant to be. Rule beside me. Show them that their rejection only made you stronger. His words made sense, but the darkness inside her whispered differently. They'll never truly suffer until they're on their knees, begging for forgiveness. That evening, as Arya was returning from another brutal training session, she found someone waiting in her chambers. A woman she'd never seen before. Petite with auburn hair and amber eyes that seemed to see straight through her. Who are you? Arya demanded. Her hand instinctively going to the silver blade Cain had given her for protection. A friend, the woman said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. My name is Elena Marsh. I represent certain interested parties who believe you deserve better than what you're getting here. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Elena's voice was soft, hypnotic. You're training to become a perfect little Luna, suppressing your natural instincts for revenge. But I can see the fire in you, Arya. The hunger for justice. Get out, but even as she said it, Arya found herself stepping closer, drawn by the woman's words. Your old pack thinks they're safe, Elena continued. Alpha Marcus is already arranging Garrett's engagement to Abeta's daughter. They're laughing about how they dodged a bullet, congratulating themselves on casting out the defective Omega. White-hot rage flared in Arya's chest. They're what? Oh yes. The whole supernatural community is talking about it. How Garrett Collins is finally getting the proper mate he deserves. Instead of the broken girl who couldn't even shift correctly, Elena's amber eyes glittered with malice. They think you're too weak to ever be a threat. The words hit like physical blows. While she'd been trying to become worthy of Lucian, her old pack had been celebrating their escape from her. The humiliation, the pain, the years of suffering, all just a joke to them. But you don't have to let them get away with it, Elena whispered, moving closer. I know people who would be very interested in helping someone like you get the justice she deserves. What kind of people? Wolves who understand that sometimes the only way to heal is to watch your enemies burn. Elena pulled out a small card with nothing but an address written on it. Think about it, Arya. You could have everything you want: power, respect, revenge. All you have to do is take it. After Elena left, Arya stared at the card for hours, her mind racing. Through their bond, she could feel Lucian's concern, his love, his unwavering faith in her. But she could also feel the darkness growing stronger, whispering that love wasn't enough, that forgiveness was just another word for weakness. That night, as Lucian held her close, Arya made a decision that would change everything. She was going to find out exactly what Elena Marsh was offering, even if it meant betraying the only person who had ever believed in her. The address Elena had given her led to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Shadowmere territory. Arya stood in the shadows across the street, her heart pounding as she watched figures moving inside. Wolves who clearly didn't belong to Lucian's pack. Their scents were foreign, dangerous, and they moved with the predatory grace of mercenaries. This is insane, she told herself. Turn around. Go back to Lucian. But Elena's words echoed in her mind. Garrett Collins is finally getting the proper mate he deserves. The image of her former mate celebrating his engagement while she suffered made her stomach twist with fury. Before she could make a decision, her phone buzzed with a text from Lucian. Emergency council meeting. Something about your old pack. Come to the archives when you're ready. Arya's blood ran cold. Had he discovered her meeting with Elena? Did he know she was standing outside a warehouse full of his enemies, contemplating betrayal? She turned and ran back toward the fortress, Elena's card burning like acid in her pocket. The archives were located in the oldest part of Shadowmere Fortress, deep underground where thick stone walls had stood for over 3 centuries. Arya had never been inside before. The massive iron doors were always locked, and she'd assumed it was just another area off-limits to someone like her. But tonight the doors stood open, and she could hear voices echoing from within. Confirmed intelligence from our contacts in Crescent Falls, Elder Samuel was saying as she approached. Alpha Marcus has been reaching out to other packs, offering detailed information about our defenses. Arya's steps slowed. What? He's using his rejection of the girl as proof that he can identify threats before they become dangerous, Victoria added, her voice sharp with anger. Claims he saw something in her bloodline that made her unfit for pack life. The bastard is positioning himself as some kind of prophetic alpha, came Lucian's voice, rough with fury. Selling intelligence about us while pretending it's about supernatural purity. Arya pressed herself against the stone wall, her mind reeling. Marcus wasn't just celebrating her rejection. He was using it as a weapon against Lucian. There's more, Samuel continued reluctantly. Our spy in their pack council sent this. Paper rustled, and then Lucian's voice turned deadly quiet. What exactly am I looking at? Ritual documents. From the night of Arya's rejection. Arya's breath caught in her throat. Ritual documents. That's impossible, Victoria said. Mate rejection is a natural response, not something that can be artificially induced. Tell that to the binding circles drawn in sacred ash, Samuel replied grimly. The specific herbs burned during the ceremony. The incantations Marcus whispered before Garrett spoke the rejection words. Everything was precisely calculated to sever not just the mate bond, but something deeper. Her connection to her wolf's true power. Lucian breathed, understanding flooding his voice. Arya's knees went weak. She grabbed the doorframe for support, her world tilting on its axis. The ritual is ancient, Samuel continued. Used centuries ago by alphas who wanted to strip potential rivals of their abilities before they could manifest. It requires the target to be emotionally vulnerable, completely trusting, and he paused. It has to be performed by someone the victim considers family. Marcus knew. Lucian's voice was barely controlled rage. He knew what she was capable of becoming, and he orchestrated her destruction. Unable to stay hidden any longer, Arya stumbled into the archive chamber. The space was enormous, with ceiling-high shelves filled with ancient books and scrolls. In the center, Lucian stood over a massive table covered in documents, his blue eyes blazing with fury. Arya, he said, immediately moving toward her. How much did you hear? All of it, she whispered, staring at the paper scattered across the table. Even from a distance, she could see ritual circles, ancient symbols, and what looked like a detailed plan written in Marcus's familiar handwriting. Show me, she demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. Lucian hesitated, then stepped aside. The documents were like looking into the face of pure evil, page after page of calculated manipulation designed to destroy her before she could become a threat. Subject shows signs of dormant alpha bloodline, she read aloud from Marcus's notes, dated months before the moon ceremony. Power signature suggests potential for Luna-level abilities. Recommend immediate suppression before manifestation. Her hands shook as she turned the page. Mate rejection ritual will require fated mate's cooperation. Garrett Collins has agreed to participate in exchange for guaranteed alpha succession. They planned this, she breathed. For months they planned to destroy me. It gets worse, Samuel said quietly, pointing to another document. Look at the bloodline analysis. Arya's vision blurred as she read her own genealogy, traced back 7 generations. Her grandmother's line wasn't the weak Omega bloodline she'd been told about her entire life. It was direct descent from Luna Queens, from the most powerful female wolves in supernatural history. Your great-great-grandmother was Luna Sarah Moonheart, Lucian said softly. She united 12 packs and ruled for 40 years. Her daughter was Luna Catherine Stormcrown, who led the supernatural rebellion against human hunters in 1847. But that's impossible, Arya whispered. My family are Omegas. We've always been Omegas. Because that's what Marcus wanted you to believe. Lucian's voice was gentle now, but she could feel his rage through their bond like a living thing. He's been suppressing your bloodline for generations, keeping your family weak and dependent, so you'd never discover your true heritage. The room spun around her as the implications hit. Every moment of weakness, every failure to shift properly, every instance of being called defective, it had all been artificial, magically induced to keep her power locked away. The rejection ritual was supposed to permanently seal your abilities, Samuel explained. But something went wrong. Instead of destroying your power, it just redirected it. To me, Lucian realized. When I claimed her, I broke the binding. Her power didn't disappear. It just needed a new anchor. Arya felt something stirring deep inside her chest, like a caged animal finally sensing freedom. Her wolf, the part of herself she'd always thought was broken, was suddenly there. Not weak or damaged, but furious at being suppressed for so long. He stole my entire life, she said, her voice changing as power began to flow through her veins like molten gold. My family's lives. Generations of Luna Queens, reduced to cowering Omegas because one alpha was too afraid to face a challenge. The papers on the table began to flutter as energy radiated from her skin. Ancient bloodline power suppressed for over 20 years was finally breaking free. Arya, Lucian said carefully, I need you to breathe. But she was past breathing. She was past rational thought. Marcus had stolen everything from her. Her strength, her heritage, her family's rightful place in the supernatural world. And now she was going to take it all back. With interest. Get me everything we have on ritual reversal, she told Samuel, her eyes glowing with golden light that had nothing to do with her wolf and everything to do with the Luna Queen power flowing through her bloodline. It's time Crescent Falls learned what happens when you try to cage a queen. The attack came at midnight, just as Arya was deep in the archives studying the ritual reversal texts. The fortress alarm system shrieked through the stone corridors, a sound she'd never heard before but instinctively knew meant one thing: war. Lucian burst through the archive doors, already half-shifted with his eyes blazing gold and his canines extended. Crescent Falls crossed our borders 20 minutes ago, he said tersely, pulling her to her feet. Marcus is leading a full assault with support from 3 allied packs. Arya's blood turned to ice. How many? 200 wolves. They're not here to negotiate, they're here to finish what they started. His hands gripped her shoulders, his expression fierce. I need you to get to the safe room. Cain will escort you. No, the word came out with such authority that Lucian actually stepped back in surprise. I'm not hiding while they attack our home. Arya, you're not ready for this kind of battle. I'm exactly ready for this, she interrupted, feeling the Luna Queen power stirring in her veins like liquid fire. They came here because of me. This ends tonight. Before Lucian could argue, Commander Cain skidded into the archives, his face grim. Your Majesty, they've breached the outer defenses. Marcus is demanding you surrender the cursed Omega for execution, or he'll burn the fortress to the ground. A laugh escaped Arya's throat, sharp, bitter, and completely without humor. Cursed Omega. After everything in those documents, he's still trying to sell that lie. Sir, Cain continued urgently, they're not just here to retrieve her. Intelligence suggests this is a full territorial takeover attempt. Marcus has promised the other alphas pieces of your land if they help him eliminate what he calls the corruption at the heart of the Northern Territories. Lucian's expression turned murderous. He's using Arya as an excuse for a land grab. Smart, Arya said coldly, her mind racing through the implications. Eliminate the defective Luna, discredit the Alpha King's judgment, and carve up the most powerful territory in North America. Clean and simple. Another explosion rocked the fortress, closer this time. Through the stone walls they could hear the sounds of battle. Snarls, howls, and the clash of supernatural forces meeting in deadly combat. We need to get to the war room, Lucian said, but Arya was already moving toward the door. No. We end this now, in the courtyard where everyone can see. Arya. She spun to face him, and for the first time since claiming her, Lucian actually took a step back. Power radiated from her skin like heat waves, making the air itself shimmer with golden light. Do you trust me? She asked. It was a simple question, but they both knew everything hinged on his answer. Trust her judgment, trust her power, trust her to face the wolves who tried to destroy her. With my life, he said without hesitation. Then follow my lead. They made their way through corridors filled with warriors preparing for battle. Everywhere Arya looked, she saw Lucian's people, wolves who had accepted her as their Luna despite the whispers, despite the political pressure, despite every reason to reject her. They deserved better than to die for her past. The main courtyard was a war zone. Bodies littered the ancient stone, and the air reeked of blood and ozone from shifted wolves. At the center of the chaos stood Alpha Marcus, his massive gray wolf form towering over two of Lucian's fallen guards. Behind him, arranged in perfect formation, were the wolves of Crescent Falls, including Garrett, whose golden coat was already stained with blood that wasn't his own. Lucian Shadowmere, Marcus called out, his voice carrying the unnatural resonance of a fully shifted alpha. Return what you stole, and I'll make your death quick. Nothing was stolen, Lucian replied, striding into the courtyard with Arya at his side. Around them, the battle gradually slowed as both sides turned to witness what they all knew would be the deciding confrontation. Everything I have was freely given. Marcus's attention shifted to Arya, and she saw something flicker in his wolf eyes. Not just hatred but fear. Even now, even with an army at his back, he was terrified of what she might become. That abomination carries a curse that will destroy everything you've built, Marcus snarled. I tried to save you from her corruption, but you were too blinded by false mate bonds to see the truth. The only truth, Arya said, stepping forward, is that you're a coward who spent 20 years suppressing my family because you were afraid of a real challenge. She pulled the ritual documents from her jacket and let them scatter in the wind. Should I read these aloud, Marcus? Let everyone hear how you manipulated a sacred ceremony to destroy a teenage girl, because your spy network told you she might have Luna bloodline. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Marcus's features. Around the courtyard, wolves from both sides began muttering as they caught fragments of the papers. Lies, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. DNA evidence, Arya replied calmly. Genealogy records. Ritual instructions in your own handwriting. She let power flow through her voice, and every wolf in the courtyard felt it, the unmistakable authority of Luna Queen bloodline. Tell them, Marcus. Tell them why you really rejected me. Because you're weak, he roared, but even his own wolves were looking uncertain now. Because you couldn't even shift properly. Because you cast a suppression spell on me when I was 5 years old. The words rang out like a bell, clear and undeniable. Because your grandmother's journal, which I found in your pack house records, documents every spell used to keep my bloodline dormant for 4 generations. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Arya let her power fully manifest. Golden light erupted from her skin, washing over the entire courtyard in waves of pure Luna Queen energy. Her wolf finally emerged. Not the broken, weak creature she'd always struggled with, but something magnificent and terrible and absolutely undeniable. She didn't just shift. She transformed into something that made every wolf in the courtyard drop to their bellies in instinctive submission. Her wolf was massive, pure white with golden eyes that held the power of every Luna Queen who had come before her. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of centuries. I am Luna Queen Arya Shadowmere, heir to the Moonheart bloodline, and you will kneel before your rightful ruler or be destroyed as the traitor you are. Even Marcus, in his full alpha form, found himself fighting the compulsion to submit. But Garrett didn't fight it at all. Her former mate, the wolf who had rejected her as weak and pathetic, pressed his muzzle to the ground and whimpered like a beaten pup. The battle was over before it truly began. Choose, Arya said, her golden gaze fixed on Marcus. Kneel and accept judgment for your crimes, or face me in combat and die like the coward you've always been. Marcus chose to run. It didn't save him. Marcus made it exactly 50 yards before Arya's power brought him crashing to the ground like a puppet with cut strings. The great Alpha who had terrorized her family for generations lay sprawled in the dirt, his massive wolf form trembling as Luna Queen authority crushed down on him like a physical weight. 23 years, Arya said, her voice carrying across the silent courtyard as she padded toward him on paws that seemed to glow with inner light. 23 years you stole from my bloodline. 23 years of my family believing they were weak, worthless, broken. She shifted back to human form, but the power remained, rolling off her in waves that made every wolf in the fortress instinctively lower their heads. Her clothes had been torn in the transformation, but someone had thrown a cloak over her shoulders. She looked like an avenging queen, terrible and beautiful and absolutely unstoppable. You want to know the real curse, Marcus? She asked, crouching beside his paralyzed form. It's not that rejected mates bring corruption. It's that cowards who try to cage queens always pay the price eventually. She placed her hand on his massive head, and golden light flowed between them, not healing judgment. Marcus's wolf form began to shrink, his power being stripped away layer by layer until he was nothing more than a broken old man lying in the dirt. The magical suppression he'd used on her bloodline for decades was reversed, flowing back into him tenfold. Live with what you created, she said softly. Live knowing you turned yourself into the very thing you claimed. I was weak, powerless, and utterly forgettable. Marcus tried to speak, but only a whimper emerged. The great Alpha had been reduced to less than an Omega, and everyone could see it. Around the courtyard, the wolves who had followed him began to kneel, not in defeat but in recognition of true power. One by one, the Crescent Falls pack, her former family, pressed their muzzles to the stone and whined in submission. Luna Queen, whispered Beta Johnson, who had once mocked her training attempts. Forgive us. We didn't know. You didn't want to know, Arya replied, but her voice held no cruelty. You chose the comfortable lie over the dangerous truth. Garrett was still pressed flat against the ground, trembling. When she approached him, he shifted to human form and looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. Arya, the mate bond, I felt it break something inside me when I rejected you, he stammered. I've been empty ever since. Please, I know I don't deserve it, but… You're right, she said calmly. You don't deserve it. But I'm not the same broken girl you rejected. I don't need your apology or your regret. I don't need anything from you at all. The dismissal was complete and final. Garrett's face crumpled as he realized she truly felt nothing for him. No love, no hatred, no connection whatsoever. He had become irrelevant. Lucian appeared at her side, his eyes blazing with pride and something deeper, a love so fierce it took her breath away. The allied packs are requesting audience, he said quietly. They want to pledge allegiance to the Northern Territories. Arya looked around the courtyard. The wolves who had come to destroy her were now kneeling in submission. The cursed Omega they tried to eliminate stood revealed as the most powerful Luna in generations. Let them come, she said. The formal ceremony took place 3 days later in the Great Hall, with representatives from every pack in North America in attendance. Word had spread quickly. The Alpha King's rejected mate was actually Luna Queen bloodline, and her power display had been witnessed by hundreds of wolves. Arya stood before the ancient throne wearing a gown of midnight blue that seemed to shimmer with starlight. The Luna crown, a circlet of silver and moonstone that had belonged to her ancestor Sarah Moonheart, rested on her dark hair. "I present Luna Queen Arya Shadowmere," Lucien announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Heir to the Moonheart bloodline, protector of the Northern Territories, and my eternal mate." The assembled Alphas knelt as one, their voices joining in the ancient oath. "We recognize the Luna Queen. We pledge our loyalty to the Northern Crown." But it was the sight of her former pack that satisfied her most. Alpha Marcus sat in the back corner, powerless and forgotten, while the wolves who had once called her family now competed for her attention like eager puppies. Elder Samuel approached with an ornate scroll. "The official bloodline recognition," he announced. "Lady Arya Blackwood is hereby acknowledged as Luna Queen Arya Shadowmere, rightful heir to the Moonheart dynasty and sovereign ruler of the Northern Territories alongside Alpha King Lucien." As the celebration continued around them, Lucien pulled Arya onto the balcony overlooking their lands. Hundreds of square miles of forest stretched to the horizon, all of it under their protection now. "Any regrets?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. Arya leaned back against his chest, feeling the strength and certainty that had replaced the broken girl she used to be. "Only that it took me so long to remember who I really was." "And who is that?" She smiled, her eyes reflecting the golden power that would never again be suppressed or denied. "Luna Queen Arya Shadowmere, the outlaw who became legend." In the distance a wolf howled. Not in mourning but in celebration. The pack had their true Luna at last, and under her rule, the Northern Territories would become the most powerful supernatural nation in the world. The rejected Omega was dead. Long live the Luna Queen.